Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is my friend Wes Bush, the product-led guy. So it's an expert session this week talking about product-led growth, PLG, one of the more modern forms of go-to-market and strategies for growing a SaaS company. Forms of it have been around forever, and there's a lot of hype and misconceptions and a lot of mistakes from SaaS founders in the early stages who are trying to use freemium, free products, free trials, and using product to help build awareness and engagement and growth in their business. Wes is an expert who's worked with over 400 SaaS companies himself. So he's talking about what works, when PLG is not useful, what happens when you're getting started, and how do you get through that, and how do you get to the highest levels of leverage with product-led growth. And we're live with Wes Bush, the CEO and founder of ProductLed. Hey, Wes, good to see you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Greg.
Yeah. Where are you? You are in the dark. You've got great illumination there, you know, the shading on your face. Where in the world are you, Wes, this week?
I'm in Toronto, Canada. So yes, it's a perfect fall day where I am.
Are you literally in the city?
No, like suburbs outside the city. I'm not much of like get me in like the middle hustle bustle of the city. I like my quiet.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I always think it's funny. It happens every time people say Toronto, Canada, as if there's another kind of Toronto. We don't say New York, USA.
And sometimes I've said like Toronto, and they're like, "Where?" And I was like,
Really?
"Oh, Canada." But yeah,
Well,
so
everybody says that, so it must happen.
it does.
You know, and you're Canadian. You grew up there in the Toronto area.
Yep. Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely.
Yeah, great. So we're talking about product-led growth today, and you're the product-led guy. You're productled.com. You're the product-led company. You've been preaching and teaching and helping and nitty-gritty with founders in the product-led game. So I'm really excited to get your perspective, because product-led's kind of it's a buzzword. Things that are product-led have been going around the software business for 20 or 30 years, free trials and freemiums and other things like that. But it's much more sophisticated and interesting these days. And it's kind of hyper scaling right now. And it's not for everybody. So I look forward to our conversation and catching up here. And I know there's product-led experts in our audience that have been doing it to drive their business. And there's newbies out there. So we'll kind of span the conversation to be most useful here. When did you get your product-led epiphany?
Yeah. So before like product-led and everything else like that, before I was doing calls, product-led growth, I was working with venture-backed SaaS companies, and I was just in charge of getting leads for their sales team. And so first I was at this company called Exonify, which was an e-learning company. Then I quickly learned there, I was like, you know what? You got to love the people you're marketing to if you're doing marketing. So then I was like, okay, I love marketers since I am one. So let's pick Vidyard. And so I started working at Vidyard.
Oh, right.
Doing the same thing, getting leads for the sales team. And they were just on a tear, growing like 2x. I think from that year I joined, it was like from 50 to 120 people in that same year. So it was like crazy fun time, a lot of growth. And then I was kind of just always talking to the sales team, being like, hey, you know what? How are the leads like I sent to you? Like, what were the conversations like? What does that look like? And to give everybody a little context, it was like I was promoting guides and white papers, which would be like the best video marketing strategy for like 2017 or something like that as an example. And at the bottom, there'd always be like, and sign up for a demo if you wanted to use Vidyard to do this and roll out this strategy. And so we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that. And I would always hear these conversations from the sales, like these leads didn't really want to talk to us. And I was like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, I don't buy products like that. Like, I'm looking literally at the tools we're using at Vidyard, like Slack and, all these other tools. I'm like, yeah, I never had that same experience. And so fast forward a little bit, we launched this free trial and it did not work. And so we're like, oh, there's, we thought this free thing, there's something to it. I could definitely get into why, but like, I'll keep it high level for now. So that didn't work. But then we decided, okay, nobody was uploading a video in that free trial. So let's make making a video easy. We created this Chrome extension, and that was really simple. Like, it was pretty cool. You could send a video to anybody pretty quickly. And within the year, like 100,000 people were using this product. And then since then, like millions of people have used that product. And it's really a core part of how Vidyard goes to market. It's a core part of how like they finds out about Vidyard. And so that was like my PLG to Jesus moment where I was like, oh yeah, like to get that 100,000, contacts as an example, like they're not exactly the exact same target I was going for with like the white papers and guides, but I was like, the amount of money we would have to raise to even get close to being able to get that same demand. I was like, that is very hard to compete with. And at that moment, I was like, there's this new way, and I'm totally product led when it comes to how I like to buy. And so it was also personal on that end. And then since then, it's been like, I've just been doing this for all the companies before it was even called product led. And then OpenView coined it. And I was like, that's it. That's it. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how we were all talking about ICP and PMF, product market fit, years ago, but the names finally happened, and everybody, finally understood it. Made it easier to convince people because there was a name now, right? To focus on your ICP, and PLG is the new acronym for that. So you were doing all those, let's say, expensive paid marketing on top of content, right? To get people interested, build your top of funnel, get those leads, and leads are more top of funnel and, let's say, demo requests, people raising their hand about the product or maybe more qualified in there. Was Vidyard kind of leads to talk to a salesperson kind of thing? Or was there a demo out there or anything like that?
That whole process was at the very beginning was like more sales led. So like those leads would then, some of them would be like hand raisers, or they would go to like requesting a demo. They would talk to SDR. Then if they're a good fit, they go to the AE. And it was a very typical kind of sales led playbook experience.
Well, in that case, marketing got the leads for sales, right? And sales had to reach way out to say, "Are you interested?" and bring it back in. These weren't salespeople doing their own outbound and finding their own customers, presumably.
They did spin up like a BDR team, but then it's the majority, like I would say like 89% of the demands was definitely coming from inbound from that end.
Right, inbound and product led. So you say 100,000 people could try this new free product. It's not your core product, but you gave something away of value. It's free, it spreads, it's useful, and so forth. But you probably have a higher hit rate on quality conversations and quality customers that come from that, as opposed to the, waving your hands about watch my demo or download my white paper.
Well, that was the biggest realization, even with that free trial. One of the kind of aha moments was our conversion rate on the website did jump 20 or 30%. And since every single time though, like we do this with clients that are like going from sales led to product led, you launch like a free trial or something. It's like, yes, your conversion rate will go up. Why? It's a better offer. And if you think about like what do you call it? I think there's like the stages of a customer journey. There's like some people are in the evaluation stage, and there's some people are like the decision stage a little later on. It just catches people way earlier when they're like, oh yeah, that's a little lower risk.
And when they come to you, they're pretty warmed up. They've tried your stuff. They like you. You gave them a gift.
If you deliver value. If you don't, then they just ghost you. That's the tricky side.
I'm surprised we have to say that, Wes. And so you're going to help enlighten us about what you're seeing out there.
Some of your listeners did this to us.
Yes, right. Let's give something away. Well, is it valuable? No, but it's a giveaway. So I always used to say it has to, any version of anything you put out there, your first low priced edition or whatever, has to be an end in itself. So not just a means to an end. So we'll talk about that. So Wes, when you started your product-led company, which isn't a software company, it is an education and training, and you help software companies go through their product-led journey to hurry up and grow faster when product-led is a good fit from them. How long have you been doing this, and how many companies have you personally worked with?
Yeah, so this is coming up on 8 years. And, as the company's grown and stuff like that, first time founding a company, it's been many companies, but it's always been focused on how do we help B2B SaaS companies grow. And at the very beginning, it was like demand gen. And then as I was getting more leads, I was like, what's going on in that trial? Like, what is happening with those people? And I always started like asking the right questions. And then it was like, oh, shoot, nothing's happening. And like, they're not getting into the product, they're not getting the value. I was like, oh, this is a bigger can of worms. This is interesting. So it always just started with the concept of like, or the core belief that if users get the value, they're going to upgrade, they're going to want to use your product. And then it just got more, not complicated, but productized, as far as like we realized there's like these 9 core things, so you got to like dial in, and then that makes it so much easier. And so over those 8 years, yes, we've helped 480 plus companies, and I've actually personally helped all those companies on that end. And the main metric we always look at is just like, did we move your self-serve revenue? And so we've helped generate $1 billion in self-serve revenue out of all those clients that we can track, at least. There's probably more than that.
And you've been doing this long enough to see, I guess, all the variations at this point. And that's part of I'm sure it's always fun, a different founder, a different market, a different puzzle. But you know the core principles that we're talking about, the core misconceptions, the core mistakes, those kind of things. So we'll be talking about that. Please define product-led in your definition, not the buzzword with the hype. You know?
So there's a lot of ways you could define it, but like, if we start with product-led growth, I would say, generally speaking, it's when you use your product to help you acquire, engage as in like get people to value, and monetize. So it's like those 3 core things. It impacts your entire go-to-market motion. Now, if we're to say, make it a little more complicated, like, what's a product-led company? Well, it's a company that does that to the whole another degree. So like, when it comes to, there's a marketing challenge, they're thinking, oh, hey, how could we use the product to like, create a viral growth loop here, or something like that, to grow through the product. The sales team is thinking the same thing, like, okay, what are those people doing in the product? Where can we better assist them, better upgrade them, and provide value to them at the end of the day too? And so that's really where I'm focusing a lot more now, is like, how do you create these product-led companies? Because it's not enough to just do product-led growth. It's just like, that's very surface level. A lot of people start there, but then they realize, for this to have depth, for us to do this at a world-class level, we need that product-led company to support that. And so, that's really the whole kind of thesis of the book I was writing on, the product-led playbook. But I won't go too much into it yet.
Well, your first book was Product-Led Growth, and I've seen that around for years, and that's on your website at productled.com. And now you've got a new book, the Product-Led Playbook. Here we go. So going deeper there. And so I see you at conferences. We've known each other plenty of time. You help out a ton of founders out there, and you've got a ton of great resources. I love your Sunday morning. What do you call that? The PLG. Freshly squeezed on Sunday mornings here. With an insight here, and you're going deep on these topics here. So back to what is product-led. That's where the product does the acquisition or the awareness, the engagement, and kind of sells itself. And so we can be more clear about that. What is the opposite of that? Is, because we're all in the product business, but the product doesn't always help before somebody pays for it. What's the opposite of product-led growth, or what are the other alternatives?
I think one of the main alternatives is just a sales-led company. And so nothing wrong with it. It's just like, how do you solve problems is different when you think of a sales-led company versus a product-led one. So in a sales-led company, a lot of times it's like very human-led in a way, as far as like, how do we solve the problems? How do we help people? How do we acquire customers, like from the marketing and the sales side? Like, it's a lot more people, whether it's SDR or account executive, from how do we engage people, get them to value? It's like, let's have great customer success managers. That's not to say product-led companies don't. It's just, in a sales company, it's a lot more common for it to be like, okay, as you onboard that customer, there's like these calls, we will do this manually. And so it really is a big part of the DNA of the company. Is like, whether you're more pro sales led or pro product led. And we can always get into like, do you have to be like,
well, we'll talk about the DNA question there, because the deeper you are, we could say the same about practical founders. It's, if somebody's been raising VC funded, it's, I've been there, and I did let's say a DNA change, but VC funded companies aren't going to make a practical founder epiphany. It's a different DNA to come out of the other side and rethink how you do everything in your business here. So if I go to a website and if I say free trial or try it now, free, and you jump right into the product and nobody's calling you, that's product led. If I go to the website and if it's call or you set up a time for the demo, the sales guy to walk you through and drag you through the qualification and so forth. That's more sales led, in your opinion.
Now, if you want me to really confuse
Okay, let's
everybody,
go. Yeah, let's be
here's the
clear here.
like
Yeah.
controversial side of things, and this
Yeah.
is really interesting because yeah, you would think that is exactly the case. And I'll give you two scenarios where a sales-led company could be product-led, even with
Okay.
salespeople, and a product-led company could still be very sales-led with that free trial and all that stuff. So I'm sure
Okay.
like you've signed up for a product-led company. Let's say they got a great free trial. Oh, great, 7 days free trial. Fantastic. You sign up, and from the minute you sign up, like give them your phone number and stuff, it's like you're getting hounded. The overall
Calls and
experience,
emails and, hey, it's Bobby here. What do we, let's
yeah, you
talk.
get like 40 emails in the 7 days. Everything in that company is screaming, I want to convert you. We're desperate. It's like, okay, I don't want to sign up. And there's been no thought to actually providing value to that kind of user. And so it's like, that's still, I would say, a very sales-led experience, despite having the free trial. Like it looks like it, but it's not acting like a product-led company. And I'll
So
give
to
you
use your language, it's kind of a product-led tactic, but a sales-led DNA.
Yes. And I will get
Okay.
to the part once I go through the example of like what's different about the go-to-market motion, because I think it's super underrated. So
All right.
let's go back to that
Excellent.
sales-led company. Let's say you're doing something really complex,
Yeah.
and like you're
Nothing
solving a
wrong
very
with that.
complex problem, and they're like, hey, Greg, how's it going? Like, here's my problem, and they're doing like great discovery. They're really understanding like what is your core problem. They're providing a ton of help, helping you sort through like, is this even a challenge for you? Is this a right or not? And usually, not always, it's not always the case, but like if you're in a blue ocean or something like that, where you're like creating a net new category, people don't quite understand it. There's a lot of
Yeah.
education that goes on.
Yeah.
So I would say in that case, that salesperson is despite being people led, it's a very product led experience where you're serving before you sell, because like that's one line. Serve
Oh.
before you sell is you have to have that.
Yeah.
But then the other part is the one biggest difference I would argue between a sales led go to market motion and a product led one
Mhm.
is just the order of how you approach it. So if
Okay.
in a sales led company, it's like you acquire people, you get them to your website, you get them to sign up for the demos usually, and then it's like you monetize, and it's about conversion, and then it's about the engagement side of things, which is okay, we'll provide value, we'll make sure you get exactly what you're promised.
Classic SaaS right there. Yeah.
Now in a product led company,
Mhm.
it's the only switch is you still have the same three things, but it's like you acquire people, you get them to sign up, but then the core focus is we have to engage. We have to make sure you've experienced some value in the product, not the whole thing, but like we need to get you to be like, yes, head nodding, this is it, this is amazing. And then it's about monetizing. And so the really like simple distinction is like serve before you sell, that has to be true. But if you break it down to the go-to-market motion, it's really that one big pillar that gets moved. In a sales company, usually you monetize before you provide a lot of that value. Not always like that example I shared, but that's generally speaking how it works.
Well, and I guess that's the gift of product value before you sell anything
Yes.
as a marketing tool. As we give away books and so forth, it used to be the business, and now it's a marketing tool. And now your product has kind of moved into a marketing, and it's in your, it's in your funnel before monetization, before sale.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Okay. So do you distinguish product-led growth as a go-to-market approach from product-led organizations? For instance, I go to Calendly's website today. I was just double checking something, and I see their pricing. They have a free, and then they have $10 a month, and then which you can get started on, and then the next one is free trial, and then the next one is call for enterprise, right? So they have the whole spectrum from
Yep.
no touch to, let's talk and do that. But, you know, can a product-led organization do all of those, or is a product-led where organization where the product-led growth approach is
Yeah, like
so
if it's
dominant?
just product led or not
Yeah.
for it to be product led. So, yeah, it's a great question because no, I believe like a good product led business at scale should definitely do the best of both worlds. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like the underlying core between all of this is like, are you customer led? Like, what does the customer want? Because if you haven't noticed, like even in the Calendly space, as an example, it's like I can't even name how many other alternatives there
Yeah.
are. So it's like if you're not really going with the grain with like what do customers and potential buyers want, you're going to get left out. If they want a sales call, give them a sales call. If they want a self-serve motion, give them that. And it's because you don't have leverage anymore as the business. It's the customer that has the majority of the leverage in this. Just like real estate, when you think about if every house is for sale, who's got the leverage? The buyer. At the end of the day. Now, if like in your space or your neighborhood, your market, it's like hot shop, there's like hundreds, thousands of solutions. It's like you don't have leverage. You wish you did, and you're acting like you think you do with that, like you can just buy from us this way. And it's like you're gonna lose because the person that has all the options gives the customer the best experience, the best terms on that, they win. And so it does come down to that part.
Yeah. So you can smell a company when they start saying we're product led and they describe their situation. You can kind of score them on, how much product led DNA they have and right how anxious they are to get the sale and how much they follow the customer as opposed to tell the customer what to do.
Like there's that for sure, which is like more of the symptoms. But then like the bigger, once you get below the fold a little bit, it's like, hey, what's your strategy? Like, what does that look like? How is this even connected to it? Like you think of Canva and it's like, wow, how could they ever help anybody design anything? It's like, it kind of has to be self-serve because that wouldn't scale any other way.
Right.
And it just has to be part of like, this is how we win.
Yeah. So what are the best examples of product led? You say Slack, we say Canva. You go there, you sign up, you never talk to somebody, no touch. Calendly, $100 a year, no touch. Is anything, what are some examples of those high volume product led growth companies?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's always that standard list, and I feel like you probably know them, whether it's like a Figma, it's like a Gmail, it's a Zoom, or it's Evernote or stuff like that too. But I don't know. Like, part of me is like, I always just like the small ones where it's like we're trying to figure it out. It's you don't have crazy volume kind of thing to play around with. You don't have like hundreds of thousands of people signing up for your product every single month, but you do have like 100 or 1,000, and you're trying to figure this out. And so I just have so much more respect for just early stage product founders where it's like you're trying to figure out this rickety go-to-market motion because right now, at least, this is the case where it's like so much harder to get started successfully, at least with a product-led go-to-market motion than it is a sales-led go-to-market motion. Whereas like you can spin up, you don't even have to have a landing page for the sales led part to get working, but a product-led motion, it's like we got to have a good product, we got to have like great case studies.
Really, really good. The standards are very high for get me to value and get me
much higher.
Yeah.
But you make that trade-off because it's like a product-led company, it's way easier to scale if you get it right. And a sales-led company is like, it is actually a lot harder to scale because it's more people-oriented and it is harder to scale up part in some companies.
So this is a pretty big thing in B2B SaaS, especially in practical founder land, where you don't say, oh, and you start with $10 million and you could build a great product and be patient. VC funding doesn't require, doesn't allow patience, but you got to get to revenue quickly. And generally sales-led is the fastest way to B2B SaaS revenue. But then you create this DNA, this habit, this infrastructure in the business, the product that never had to do the front door. They click, they get in the product, they get to value without anybody telling them what to do. And then you wait for them to knock on your door and say, now I'm ready to buy something, right? That's the different kind of patience. But can you start with sales and, to prime the pump and then move to product led, or is that a DNA conversion that's pretty difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of founders, and like when it comes to like what you start off with, if it's going to be like product led from day one, controversial, but I would say no, please don't. Like every founder should do founder led sales first. Like find, some level of product market fit before you start making this like completely automated self-serve product where you're not going to talk to many customers. That is not the best way to build a business. You still have to do that hard part at the very beginning. And so I would say start there, start talking to customers at the end of the day, because you do need to have that, like, are we solving a core problem? Are we validated? Like people are willing to pay for this? Have we done all that stuff before we're like actually investing a ton of time into the product side of things?
Well, generally products fund, Calendly's like $120 a year for their first paid level. And Canva just the same. But we couldn't imagine having a sales touch in there to qualify us or to sell us something more. It's just so high volume and low priced. But at the other end, maybe 10,000 a year, on up, things are more complicated, more complex.
Yeah. But like,
Are there degrees of product led based on your annual contract value?
Yeah, there could be. But one thing, like back to that Calendly example as well, sure, it's $120 per year.
Yes,
But
right.
then it's like, hey, great. Let's say you're
10,000
Dell.com, you
users.
have
Yeah.
like 1,000 people signed up on that. And then knock, knock, knock from, Slack or sorry, Calendly. It could be
Yeah.
Slack too in that
Yeah.
case. And it's like, hey, you know what? We've noticed that, 1,000 plus people are
Right.
using Calendly. Would you like to kind of put that all together, have your single sign on and roll it out? And we can even get you a better rate, all that stuff. And you're like, yes, please. And that's actually the best combo where it's like you have this beautiful self-serve motion feeding in all of these potential great
Right.
companies that could then be upgraded to more of those enterprise plans. Then you have the sales reps that are actually kind of looking at, okay, which companies or accounts need more of our help? And they're providing a ton of value because it's like, actually, that company does need some help centralizing things. And it would make sense for us to assist them because then we could lock in, let's say, okay, you get 1,000, 1,500 licenses for X price, fixed costs, all that fun stuff that enterprise businesses love, more security. And it's like, boom, deal done. And it's the best of both worlds. And so regarding the annual contract value, this one's a little bit of a hot topic because you're like, well, if it's over 10,000 annual contract value, does it work or not? So I'll tell you one scenario where it doesn't work, and I'll tell you one that will work. So the first one where it doesn't work is, let's say you go from free plan to, oh wait, Greg, it's 2,000 per month, and then it's like, oh, okay, so it's a pretty big jump, right? And that often doesn't work because you want your pricing to kind of look like a ladder. If like one step to the next step. So it's like from free to, I don't know, let's say like 200, $300. It's like, it's manageable. It's not that far. Now, if it's like, whoa, I got to jump on that ladder to try and just hold on to the top, and I got to do a chin up and get on to the next level. That's hard, and many people don't do that. So that's like the first disclaimer, big mistake to avoid. And I've seen a lot of companies do that. So I'll just share that out. Now, as far as ACV goes, you can still get a really high ACV for companies, but you got to do one thing, which is you got to understand what are your value metrics and how can you scale with that company's growth. So if they're getting more value from your product, you can charge them more. Some of the most common examples, whether it's like ActiveCampaign, HubSpot, all that fun stuff, it's like it's per contact. As you add more contacts, we can charge you more. And as you get more value out of that, hopefully that's a good leading indicator. Or Stripe as an example. It's like, you made 10 million, congrats. We just took 3%. And it's a super simple transaction, yet you're like, how are we paying Stripe that much? We haven't even talked to somebody at Stripe. It happens way too often.
This week's podcast is brought to you by my friends at Fullscale. Last year, I interviewed three-time software founder Matt Watson on this podcast about his successful practical founder journeys. Matt leveraged offshore development talent in his last two SaaS companies to hire quickly and scale up efficiently. His top developers and designers were offshore in the Philippines, but they weren't one-off contractors and they weren't difficult to manage outsourced agencies. He found an endless supply of top tech talent who became savvy members of his team, working hard every day to get things done. So for his fourth tech venture, Matt created Fullscale, which is one of the fastest growing software development companies in any region. Fullscale vets, employs, and supports over 300 professional developers and designers and testers in the Philippines who can augment and extend your core dev team. I know practical SaaS founders who use Fullscale to grow faster and avoid the product development nightmares that can kill a growing startup. So visit fullscale.io and see why their approach works so well, and book a call to see if they can help you. Now back to our podcast. Let's talk about that first. Let's talk about a couple misconceptions, the common things. You've seen it all here. So when somebody says, okay, I did the founder-led sales, maybe our annual contract value is $12,000, $1,000 a month, something like that. Not obviously I could put some sales effort in there, in the business model would support that. But I have this hunch about a free trial or some kind of freemium aspect, and I want to go from founder-led sales. And I caught the buzzword. I read the book. I love product-led growth, customer-led. What's the biggest mistake founders make when they're taking their first step with product-led?
Yeah. And this one's really interesting because they do everything right, but everything wrong at the same time. And so when you think about like, what does that mean? It's like, well, they just do product led growth. So that usually involves thinking about like, what is our free trial freemium model?
Yeah.
Okay, we got to onboard people, get them to value. We got to
Mhm.
like readjust our pricing because maybe it's not super transparent. And of course, we got to have like some sort of offer where we promise people, hey, this is what you get for your free offer. Go ahead and sign up. So they get started on that. They're like, this is it. Yes, we are going to do it.
And
And
that's hard
then
enough. That's not a simple thing. So, yeah, I
it's a
appreciate that.
lot
Yeah.
though, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
most people kind of somehow wind up with those like four things.
Okay.
And then they launch it and then it's like, oh, this thing's not working. Why is it not working?
Yeah.
And then they usually find something on our site or something at that stage. And we're always talking to people who are like,
Right.
how do we get in ahead of this? Because they're always dealing with the people who have already launched and it doesn't quite work out that well. And so the other side of the page is they got to build the product led organization first, which sounds
Mm.
super counterintuitive. And for many founders that are not patient, which I'll put myself in
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
camp of
Mhm.
go, 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 it doesn't come natural. And so you have to build that product led organization. And you do that with like understanding, what is our company level strategy? Where does PLG even fit into like how we're going to win? Like what market are we going to try and dominate and become the obvious choice in? And so what's required in order to do that? And some of those questions just lead you naturally down the path of, well, okay, yeah, this is strategic. It's not just a tactic that where
Mhm.
many companies kind of place it in the bucket of, well, we need more signups, so people want free trials more than demos. So let's just slap on a free trial. Tactic.
Yeah.
Once again, that's
Mhm.
the sales-led company trying to play the product-led playbook. And so that's one thing. You start with the strategy, then you get really clear on who's the ideal user, the person that's going to give the most value to the product. You have to understand that
Oh my
person
goodness.
better than anyone in the market.
Ideal user profile.
Yes. And that's a big difference from a sales led company where it's usually the ideal buyer. And the
Mhm.
reason it's important is because like that user is going to make or break that business. Where if they don't get to value, they're not coming back. They're not even going to tell their boss about that. They don't
Yeah,
care
yeah.
about your product that much. So you have to love them and they'll love you back, but you got to understand like their challenges. And then based on that, you can craft a really intentional free model. I could get all nerdy and talk all day about like how do you
Yeah.
actually do that and break down like what do you give away for free. I don't know if you want to go that direction or go through other components, but
Well, that's generally where founders I'm talking to, they're not talking about PLG before they're starting just because they don't know they need it and they don't know they need to make it part of their organization DNA. But they get up and running and they're moving the bar from, is it freemium? Is it free
totally.
trial? Where do we have the payment gate? And all of that. My answer has always been, well, you've got to try something and track it and see. So, because I've heard something, I've seen it go different directions, and it all depends. Is there any useful generalization about payments up front, or get the credit card up front, or wait for the credit card, or it really just depends, and
Yeah.
you have to test and monitor it?
So this is kind of controversial, but like I believe the model you choose doesn't matter. Not a bit. What really does matter when you think of like, okay, Slack has freemium, like all these other companies have like opt out free trials, usage based, opt
Ah,
out, like Ahrefs has an opt out free trial kind of
yeah,
thing
yeah.
too. So it's like you can make it work at any scale. That's not the question. What is the right question to ask is what are we trying to accomplish in this free motion? What is like actually the outcome that we hope somebody will get? So does your free motion actually have a transformation in it where it's like, hey, if you're a mini Mario and you pick up this free product, are you gonna like grow bigger, spew fire, do cool stuff? What is that transformation? Because
Mm,
if you don't have that, it's literally just like, hey, look around, see for yourself. What can you do in this product, and figure it out on your own.
Yeah,
And
there's no
people are like,
prize inside. No, oh my God, this is cool, right?
yeah,
Yeah, no
there's
amazing.
nothing to tell them like, I
Right.
like this. I feel different. Like when I used Canva for the first time, I loved it because I was like,
I can
I
do it.
hate Photoshop. Like I in
Oh,
university,
yeah.
I took like classes on Photoshop. It's intense. But then you do that, you're like, I'm like 95% of the way there. And that was easy. So I'm going to keep using that. And there's a transformation there, and that actually spreads the viral growth loop as well. So you got to have that, you got to get clear on that outcome, whatever that is. In Canva, it's designing that first poster. And then beyond that, you got to go through, okay, now what are the challenges that would, prevent people from doing that? Now, sometimes when you pick an opt-out free trial, that is a really big challenge. You're like, you're asking a lot of me, Greg. I got to give you my credit card number. And I don't even know, like, you didn't have much social proof on their website. So I don't know if I should do this or not. So that's a challenge. We could remove that and just have like an opt-in free trial without the credit card. But you list out all of those challenges that would prevent people from experiencing that outcome. And then you just simply line up all the solutions that make this easy, smooth as butter, so that when they go into that experience, they're like, I want to get there to that outcome, and boom, like I can do it much faster. And like, I feel like our biggest skill at ProductLed is like, it's hard to figure out like, what is that outcome? Like you can go through that process and try and figure it out on your own and get pretty close, but it is something where it has to be, one of our clients said, it's like tangible value. Has to be tangible. That was like kind of the word that stuck out to him. He's like, it's not just clicking around anymore. It's something actually meaningful for them. And in their case, they were a time tracking solution. And we were initially thinking it was like, let's give 5 free people time tracking. But they were actually not solving that core problem. It wasn't just time tracking. It was time tracking compliance. Totally different. So we're like, oh my goodness, we got to give this away for the entire company. That's crazy, but it's really fascinating because we can upsell them on all these other things, and there's these other problems. And so, if you go through that process, you'll wind up with an interesting. And the last question there is just, well, what's the model? We have all those solutions. We package them up. That's the free thing. Is that a certain number of units per free trial to get to that experience? Is that a time-based thing? Can people do it in 14 days? Which honestly, most times I kind of like sign up for something. I'm like, it doesn't feel right. It's usually because it's like, oh, it's just a time-based thing that does have zero correlation with how long it actually takes me to do that. And so I'm not that compelled to do it.
Right. Well, I'm sure you're going through this diagnosis all the time. Do you have to set up in every case a simple metrics to say, well, you could do it either way. We're going to have to figure out what your core model is and what works. We're going to have to try it. Like, what do you find people measuring? I mean, all the way from website visits to demo page visits or free trial pages, clicked on, all the way to, I guess, net new customer LTV, lifetime value. So net new customers who are happy and stay.
Yeah.
I mean, do you set up a spreadsheet or metrics to say, let's try that and the science experiments and see if it worked?
Totally. So the metrics are standardized as far as like what we like to track, but then what is defined as that is like the trickier part that we got to all get on the same page. So we track 3 things usually. There's like your North Star metric. We go through that, but the go-to-market metrics is really the main meat and bones of this. And then there's like business health metrics, like your churn, your, how much monthly recurring revenue are you getting this month and all that fun stuff. So for the purposes of this, I'll just focus on like go-to-market metrics. So you would look at like overall users to the site, like how many people are coming on here, and then how many signups is kind of the next one. Like, what does that look like? And then of those signups, how many of them actually successfully went through the onboarding? So they went through, they did like the meaningful stuff they had to do. And usually for most product companies, that's where like the war zone is. And so we're like, we got to focus there. And after onboarding, then it's like, how many people actually got to a first strike? This is like some point in the product where you feel like, man, this product's fascinating. I haven't experienced necessarily the whole product.
So is that the epiphany that you're talking about, the value metric?
Yeah, like some people call it like a aha moment.
Yeah. Jeff Moore used to say this, he was on a board of a company I was with. He used to say, this is the Crossing the Chasm guide, the stairway to heaven, right?
Yes.
The stages getting to the epiphany.
That is
kind of thing.
exactly
But
it.
you're saying that is the epiphany.
Yep. Yeah, they get to that epiphany. And then once they do that, it's usually not enough for them to immediately just jump on to like, okay, let's upgrade them right away. And so we have this one other step, which is called the key usage indicator, which is have
Yeah.
they done this like 2 or 3 times? And this is trying to build more of a habit. And so what we've identified is that if we just jump from a first strike to upgrade, they're not quite hooked yet. They don't
Mhm.
quite see like, oh yeah, I could see myself doing this every day kind of thing. And so we build that habit, and then it's about the upgrade, how many people get to there, and then churn and all that stuff. So with those metrics, we just look at them every single week, and we can usually understand like, hey, here's your bottleneck. And it doesn't always like feel like it's exactly here, we know it, but most times we can understand
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
this is where
Yeah.
people are dropping off, and we should definitely focus here. And if we don't know the answer, let's interview those users that are stuck there. It's easy.
Is it reasonable to make any generalizations about conversions from a website users to trial signups and signups to onboarding and onboarding to epiphany and epiphany to monetization? You know, the 1% or 3% or 10% or whatever those are, or it just depends in every situation and you just got to get your metrics and start moving it.
Yeah. So I personally hate benchmarks. I know a lot of people love
Okay.
them
Yeah.
because
Good.
they're like, yeah, this is good. And I know like VCs love them, but like they publish a lot of these benchmark reports. And honestly, they are good for like understanding where the bar could be. And I think it's good to be like a baseline could be here. But I never want founders to focus on like that's where I should be because like your product is completely different. Like if you're
Yeah.
comparing like
Yeah.
free to paid conversion rate with like I don't know, Calendly versus, oh, you have this like complicated enterprise tech thing. Like it would be great if it could be that high, but like it's not. And there's severe things we got to go through here that will block a lot of users. And so I love just, okay, using them as like a guide initially to be like, oh yeah, freemium 3 to 5%. It's nice to know. But then let's just focus on our benchmarks every
Yeah.
single month. Let's make those the best benchmarks, the ones we really care about. If we're at 2%, let's get it to like 5 or whatever. And then we'll go beyond that because yeah, that's my way of thinking.
Uh,
Practical, hopefully.
yeah. Well, that is a practical game. And it is one of the reasons why I think it's one of the benefits of being more bootstrapped or lightly funded and not
Mhm.
big funding. I've been done both, and the big funding is the myth is, oh, they don't have the resources to run all these tests and do
Totally.
all these trials. But you're doing it with a gun to your head that says, hurry up and this better damn work. And you do 10 experiments at once, you can't really see which one helped. So you kind of have to go through that stairway to heaven, busting these things down. Can you really push that? I mean, if somebody says we're here, we got some data, we got our first, experiments that we've tried, and we want to get to here, can you tell them how long it's going to be that before they get to improving, or is it
Product-led
just
nirvana?
yeah,
No.
yeah? So if you have, like funding, you actually have to convince people that by the end of the year we'll definitely be here, right?
Yeah.
And then when it's not, it's counterintuitive, but it kind of spoils the experiments when you throw too much funding in it.
Yeah. And I think like there is a certain stage though where like you could accelerate that
Well, sure.
if let's say your free to paid conversion rate is really good. Like it's
Yeah,
solid, you're consistently getting like some good marketing channels. If let's say it's Facebook ads or something like that, it's
yeah.
like, hey, okay, let's like 10x that and see if it still does that. But it's like very not just like let's do all the channels at once and then like you lose that strategy.
Yeah. Well, it is one of the difficulties. So let's talk about that. So you have a product-led organization, right?
Yep.
It kind of, moving in your direction that your books are explaining, and you talk about in your website and on your podcast and so forth. And we're starting through the experiments, and it's getting pretty okay. Well, now we need back to the top of funnel. We need to feed users there.
Yeah.
We're back to, is it paid? Is it organic? Is it partner led or some other type of experience? You've got to get people to the website, to the
Yeah.
product experience. But you shouldn't, like you just said, you shouldn't spend money on that until you know you have a
Yeah.
reasonable conversion.
I got something fun. So like the
Okay.
third stage of the book, it's all about like exponential scale. How do you do that faster and more practically? And
Hmm.
so the very first component of that is data. So those go-to-market metrics that we went through,
Yeah.
you just be like, okay, every single week, the entire leadership team needs to know, like, this is the core bottleneck. Like, boom, this is where we focus. And it's not just like, hey, Greg, like, take the lead on this one. You own the metric and good luck. It's like, no, this is preventing the entire organization
Right.
from growing. So we're going to all support you, Greg, and you're going to be like the mini CEO of the day. And you can tell us, like, how could we support you? Because, like, let's say you own signups, and that's the main thing that's blocking us. And so now that we know, like, okay, this is where we really got to focus. The next component is the growth process, which is all about, like, every single week, or you can do this on a monthly basis too. You then go through and come up with, like, what are some experiments? What are some things we could try to do this and actually solve this specific problem? And of course, you vet them. You don't just launch the first one fire from the hip, but you go through that. And what's really beautiful about it is, let's say it's testing a new channel is like one of those ideas. It's like, okay, great. Let's test it out. We see a good promise, LinkedIn ads, believe it or not. And then it's like, okay, we got like 100 signups from that. We should definitely invest more at a good, like, cost per acquisition. So now what do we do? Well, the third and last one is team. So it's like, now that we've set that up, we've got some good, experiments going on that end. It's like, maybe we hire a LinkedIn ad specialist. Could be a contractor, but just start off there. And eventually, if it's a core channel, it's like, let's bring them in full time and do that and scale up that channel. And so when you approach problems this way, what's very practical about it, and what's good about for bootstrap founders, is the fact that you will actually solve most problems with your existing team, and you won't, like, bring people into the equation when it's too early. Or I've done that mistake myself too many times. Where, like, we want to grow, let's hire like a head of growth, and then you're like, and it's not growing. What's going on? It's not his fault. He's just walking into a mess, and he's got to set up the channels, go through some of these things. So if you focus on the bottleneck, it will definitely lead you in a much better position, and you'll be more set up to be like, okay, this person is ready. They got the playbook. They're good to go, and run.
Yeah. So nail it before you scale it, and
Yes.
that's you gotta know you have some good conversion. I'd start at the bottom of the funnel. I heard you say effectively,
Totally.
and work your way back up. Doesn't a product-led organization, literally that staff meeting, what about the numbers this week? What are we doing? Doesn't everybody point to the product owner, and engineering, the product roadmap? Well, I need this, and we have this feature to get to the value metric, and product isn't just now the end of the funnel, right? In a sales led, it's marketing right up front, and it's conversion in the middle, and it's monetization, and it's engagement and activation, and keeping those customers on board. Product is everything. Again, is that a hallmark of a real product-led organization? Product-led roadmap affects the whole business?
Yeah, and it should. Like, if the, like, back to that signups, it's like, okay, yet we have, like, this chat bubble. It's like, maybe it's powered by Greg. And it's like, people find us because of Greg is on every site. And it's like, wow, that's a great growth lever that we solve for the product that's now helping marketing. And so, I think ideally, like, it is something that the product is just embedded inside the company. We solve problems ideally with the product, because at the core, like, the best benefit you get with being product led is leverage. It's because your product eventually turns into your best marketer, your best salesperson, your best customer success manager, all those things. And so it's like, how do you create that? Well, you have to build it up. It's not like day one, this, like, product-led marketer, which is your product, is like, great. No, it's going to suck. You got to train it up. You got to test things out, see what works. And then over time, it becomes unstoppable because you created all this leverage and it's doing the majority of the work. And you can be like, Esvin at UserFlow with like 5 million annual recurring revenue, 3 employees. It's
3
like,
employees.
how the heck
I've had him on the podcast twice. I know you've had him on your podcast, all the
Yeah.
product-led podcasts he's been on. But what an amazing story. He did the sales-led with his previous company at UserFlow, Esben, and he sold his company to another product-led company. So he was all in on solving that, and he got that flywheel going. And he also fed that flywheel with paid ads, and
totally.
was profitable, along the way. But like literally 3 people grew this company to about 1,000 customers, and 5 million before they sold a majority of it.
Yeah, which is awesome. I want to see more companies like that.
Yes. What percentage, if you went to SaaStr and SaaS Doc and SaaS Open, and you go to these conferences and all the SaaS founders stand up. What percentage of software companies in the modern B2B SaaS marketplace should be using product-led growth as a primary growth channel?
Yeah. So I don't like necessarily think of product growth as just like a growth channel. It's like something
Yeah,
you can do in the company, but you could definitely use
yeah,
it
yeah,
to help get more
yeah.
people. So we did a lot of research for the product playbook. One of them was like, okay, how much, like what percentage of people prefer to try before you buy versus talk to someone in sales? And
Oh,
so,
darn it. Start with the customer again, Wes. You
yeah,
brought the customer in here again. That makes life harder for all of us founders, unfortunately. No, I
yes.
get it.
So it's like, yeah, 97% of people want to try before you
97.
buy. And then when it comes to the other side of like what should SaaS companies be, I think right now when we analyze 568 of those companies, just randomly
Hmm.
picked SaaS companies, 50% are still sales led. So there's still like the majority is
Yeah,
sales led. And then like 28% is the kind of hybrid, like you're doing both
yeah,
motions.
yeah,
And then 22% is just pure product led. And so what I kind of predict though is it's going to change a lot. Like there's still going to be a place for sales led companies that might be
yeah.
like, let's say 20%. And on
Hmm.
the far end, it might be like product led is the other 20. And then 60% is going to be this hybrid motion where they're using the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense in the long term. There are some products that are so complex that you can't imagine somebody popping in and getting value on a fleet management software thing. Maybe
Totally.
there's something you give them, like an ROI tool or some other thing on the front end. The classic example there was, the website grader tool, right? You gave a
Yeah.
product tool, right, as a product gift to get leads in the old days for HubSpot, part of their inbound strategies and so forth here. So it isn't for everybody, but you're advocating that most software companies could do more product led.
Yeah, I don't think it's just like they should. It's like if you want to, back to that real estate example, if you're in a market that's competitive and there's a lot of other choices for that buyer, you don't have the leverage. In fact, you thought you had a choice, product led versus sales led.
Ah, okay.
You
Well,
don't.
yes.
Surprise.
Yeah.
They want what they want. And if like 97% of people want that, it's like you have to make it work and you got to figure out that part.
Now, when you are working with these companies and they're in the game and they're seeing improvements, but they're investing in these experiments and these changes and so forth. So, does it ever come to a point where they say, we can't get through this unless we raise a bunch of money because the experiments are so expensive? Or can we stay in the practical zone almost always with product led growth, the therapy and the learning that you guys provide?
Yeah. Well, I see like for the common pattern where like they try to make it work and it doesn't. So like this is exactly what usually happens. It's like, hey, we launched the product at motion. It's
Yeah.
not generating a lot of revenue. And then they're like, well, we still have to salvage all the business. So then it gets like hunter mode in the free trial. And then eventually they're like, well, this is still less effective than the demo. So let's do the demo thing again
Yeah.
because we're doing something okay there. And then sometimes they resurrect it. They come back for a couple more bats. Depends on like what stage
Yeah.
of business is. If it's the core
No,
product,
I've seen it. It's hard
that's
to
a lot
make the
harder.
change. I
But
totally, yeah.
yeah, if it's like a add-on product, like okay, you got more at bats, you can go through that process once again, learn from hopefully the first one. So yeah, there's no perfect like this is exactly how it works, but that's what I see a lot of times. It's just because it's a rickety go-to-market motion to get started, and I'm just trying to standardize it a bit more, where it's like let's make it easier because right now it's way too complicated.
Right. I get it. So you're in the business, as I am, of helping SaaS founders be more successful and gain more leverage in their business, put a dent in their market and change their universe and create a valuable software company.
Totally.
If you were to start a software company today, I'm sure it would be PLG DNA. But
Yeah.
what end of this? What kind of software company would you create? Would you say it's not a new market? It's an existing market that people know about. There's a proven hole there. The incumbents are all sales led, and we're the alternative. What are the factors that you would look to think about starting your own SaaS company as a product led hotshot?
Yes. Well, I am going to start my own, but
Excellent, of
it's
course.
just the when question. And
Yeah.
so the product led playbook And when I was writing it, I was like, man, like we're doing this in spreadsheets and everything else like that. And sure, we're trying to like customize Notion tables and stuff to get a little further along. But then even then, I'm like, oh, it's still breaking down. It's clunky because managing your entire business, like your whole go-to-market motion, there's a lot of moving pieces. And so, yes, it would be that because I think it's the lowest risk thing to start as a SaaS. So it's like we have the audience, we have the methodology, the IP. But what I see like as an opportunity for all SaaS companies, and I'll hopefully live this out, is it's not enough to just have software. It's like
Yes.
it used to be okay to do
Yes.
that. But if you think about like a pie where it's like, hey, this is the pie of what it takes for somebody to be successful, there's like, let's say the product piece is like this. And then there's like the like knowledge side, like what do they not know that's holding them back from this stuff? Like if
Yes.
you don't know what PLG is, like good luck, like the software doesn't matter. And then on the skill side, like back to where we were talking about with the model part, I was like, that's a skill we've weirdly developed of like, you should probably do that as a free thing. And it's like, I don't know what happened there, but like, it's usually more or less good. And so it's like, it's a weird skill, but it's like, now we got to subset that and can basically bring to the market a complete pie. And so if you're listening to this, you're like, no, how do I apply this to my company and stuff like that? Although we're talking about all product-led things, really try and understand, like back to those challenges your user faces, there's usually a lot of stuff they don't know. There's usually skills they lack.
Yeah.
And I think the best companies are the ones that are going to bridge that gap the best. An example with one of our clients, Powbox, they do like HIPAA email compliance for mental health professionals. And so you could use something like a G Suite or Outlook, and it just becomes HIPAA compliant. But like the setup is really hard. Like it's like, hey, Greg, can like we hook up your domain registrar and like we'll change the DNS, the DKIM, all that fun stuff. And like for a mental health professional, they're like, ah, God, like kill me. Right. So like it's really friggin' hard for them to do that. So what do? Well, they subset it with a customer support specialist who literally just does this every single day for customers. And they go through the motion, they set it up with them, and they leave them feeling empowered. Be like, and listen, this is a one-time setup. You don't have to do this again. They're like, thank God, I'm never.
We'll just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I mean about subsetting some of those needs, whether it's a setup process or anything else like that. I think just providing that full solution is huge.
Yeah. Last question about the, some of the nitty gritty here. Does PLG generally drift towards lower pricing? Does, or can you do it another way?
Yeah. So yes, it generally does, because when it comes down to how do you want to win in the space, if you think about in my first book, the Product Growth one, I had this like grid of like, there's these 4 kinds of companies you could choose to be. And one of them is like best cost. And then the other one's like best value. And so there's like this one quadrant where you find all the winning products, which is like, it's in that quadrant. You get the best value, best price, and that's the win zone. Now, it's hard to pull that off, but like that's where you win the majority of the customers in your space. You become the obvious choice, like a Netflix or something like that. You just win. So when you think about that, yes, you do have to have that, but you can start low and scale up to a high annual contract value, but you need the right value metrics. And so that's why like pricing is one of those non-components in the ProductLed Playbook, because it's like you need that and you need to know it really well. And it ties so closely to the model you choose, because like that's one tier. The pricing is the 2 other tiers. Hopefully you don't have like 10 other paid tiers and stuff like that too, but it's all interlinked.
So let's talk about your product-led gifts of value for your customers here. Folks can find out, and they can read your blog and listen to the podcast to hear examples and some of the nitty-gritty stuff there on your website. What other resources are available for them to get started, let's say freemium?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our freemium motion is actually the ProductLed Playbook. And so this is like behind the scenes. It's so meta, right? I had to create our own like PLG product. And so
if you did it any other way, it would be a sin.
Exactly. And so in the book, it actually goes through the full kind of framework, exactly what we do with our clients. Everything we talked about, it just goes more depth.
No, all those charts, that the boxes and the circles, the pies are definitely there.
Yeah. And so, Yeah, you can get the free audiobook, and that's at productledgift.com. And that's my gift to you. And you can
Okay, great.
implement it inside your business, see those
Yeah.
results. And that's what I'm hoping you'll get a lot of value out of it.
Okay. And what do you offer for serious SaaS founders that are in the game and it's complex? There's a lot of moving parts. They realize it isn't just a simple tactic for one person on their team. They got to think about this holistically and get through a lot of complexities. What do you offer to help SaaS founders?
Yeah. So it's basically two options. One's just like done with you. So like we will guide you through how to actually implement the
Hmm.
product led system. And so it's more workshop oriented, but we'll lead like your entire leadership team through like how to actually implement this inside your business. And
Hmm.
then the second one is a lot more hands on, where it's like, okay, you don't have specific capabilities, let's say, on your team. You don't have like a head of PLG or something like that. And so we'll bring in like a head of PLG into your company, and they can actually execute. So they could do between like 1 or 3 projects per month, whether that's like customer research,
Hmm.
punching out your new offer and fixing up your
That's
onboarding. And so,
actual implementation, is what you're saying.
yeah, absolutely. And so that's really the two different levels of working with us.
Okay. And is the first one more like classroom and masterclass and resources so you can see it and then do it yourself with the option of have people jump across the table and help you get it done?
Yeah, so like the most affordable one is like a group kind of setting where you'll go
Yeah,
through
of
that
course.
in a
Yeah.
cohort option, and you still get like insane value. The goal is to
Yeah,
make
of
a really
course.
good value. But then the other option is you could work one on one with a product led implementer, but they're
Hmm.
just doing the workshop side of things. They're not like rolling up your sleeves, be like, all right, Greg, let me like do this for you. It's more like, hey, here's the system. We're gonna implement it inside your business together on these calls, but it's limited to those calls.
Yeah, I totally get that. People need a lot of help out there. Thanks for all you do to help all those many SaaS founders who work with you personally and now members of your team, and for all your contribution and value gifting that you've done out there with your content. It's really useful stuff for a really important topic. Wes, what kind of advice can you leave us with, our SaaS practical founders out there who are getting on the field and starting to grow up and experimenting with product led growth and getting on the drug and seeing the challenges, seeing the opportunities? What advice can you give them about how to keep going and play the game?
Yeah. Well, I think like there's keep going, but then also how to stand out. Like in a commoditized space, I think SaaS is, there was the
Yep.
glory days. There wasn't like as many SaaS options, and then now we're in like the AI days where it's
Yeah.
like it's if you thought it was competitive, it's gonna get scary competitive. And
Scary
the best
competitive. Yeah.
way to differentiate is really like serve before you sell. Like people know when it's like, hey, like what you just said there. It's like I can hear the care in like what you're saying, and I
Hmm.
can see that, I can feel
Hmm.
that. And then it's also that comes across, and that's how you differentiate. It's not just hey, like transactional, all that stuff too. So whatever, if it's your free product, make it feel that, have empathy built in, understand your users problems better than anyone else. And that's how you really stand out in a world which is just fighting claw and tooth for
Right.
you're getting the customer to close.
And that's the standard. We as customers, we're requiring that. Who gets me
Totally.
most? Who gave me the most value?
Yeah.
Who got me there faster?
And that a
Uh,
lot of times might mean just being really, really, really specific about who you serve. It can't
ah,
be everybody.
ah.
And it's like, okay, it should be that obvious, but it's not. We got to really hone in this commoditized market for sure.
And is that customer market ICP focus, is that ever not there in a successful product led? I mean, you can't be successful trying to serve everybody, but in product led, uh, I guess there's a pretty wide net for some of these products. But
Yeah, I met one
yeah.
company. I already mentioned them a bunch of times, and I was talking to their like growth person who's leading PLG of that company. And he was like, it's really weird. Like I've worked at like all these other companies, but in Canva, there's no like ideal customer profile for at least their free product because it genuinely is like it's everyone. And
Yeah.
then when they launched their Teams product, that's when they were like, oh, okay, now
Oh,
now we have to figure this out and get really specific on like who is the ideal user for this. And so it was a bit of a learning thing, but I was impressed because they did make it really, really far without having to identify
yeah.
that.
Yeah. They procrastinated focus here. Well, Wes, I see you're very focused. Thanks for your focus. Thanks for sharing your tips and insights today on the Practical Founders podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for watching this week's founder interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to hit like and then subscribe to my Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly videos for serious software founders who are building valuable companies without big funding. Check out my blog and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. And follow me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. See you next week.